My name is Elisa Steele. You're watching Deconstructing the Culture. Today I have the honor of bringing you a special guest, Elisha Krauss. Elisha, thank you so much for joining me today.
Always excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. And first, very, very briefly, have you always been a conservative? And if not, when did you know you were a conservative?
I guess I was always a conservative. My parents did a good job of making sure that we always discussed sex, religion, and politics around the dinner table, which I know are supposed to be the faux pas that you don't talk about. My mom was a military brat. My dad was in the Coast Guard, went to the Naval Flight Academy, then worked in corporate piloting. My grandfather was a local judge, so there were always kind of discussions that happened, I think, in the house. But my parents, yeah, it was around. Politics was around. My mother was the chairwoman of the county RNC, ran for political office twice when I was in high school. So I got a taste of the political nerd bug, and I've always been a political geek. But I really do credit my parents to, I don't ever remember them being like, oh, well, we're voting for George W. Bush and you should too. They kind of, if I had questions or I could observe their dialogue and their conversations with their adult friends, and they did a good job of sharing it in, I think, a filtered, innocent way if I had specific questions, that was appropriate for my age at the time. But yeah, so I guess I have always been a conservative. And of course, since 14 and 33, there's things that have changed in life experience and perspective, and people that have let me down that I've voted for. And don't worry, it'll happen to you too.
Of course. Well, I think it already has. But yeah, I am curious. In today's world, we have a really polarized climate, especially on the college campus, and we are now more and more having stories, and I've had friends personally who have had issues because they called someone the wrong pronoun or they violated a free speech zone. Did you ever feel like there was any issues with that when you were in college? Were there any issues with penalizing papers or anything because of a conservative voice, or not so much?
Well, I'm a college dropout. I don't know if many people know that about me. I'm not sure if it's on my wiki page, but I was homeschooled. I was homeschooled all 12 years, and then I went to a little Christian college called the King's College in New York City. And I was there for a year before I decided to drop out and produce the Sean Hannity radio show, because I thought, hey, I'm kind of going to school to work in production and media, and this is a job opportunity I should take and not rack up the student loan debt. So I was grateful that I would have graduated in '08 when a lot of my other friends couldn't get jobs, after graduating from college, because of the Great Recession at the time and the housing crisis, et cetera, et cetera. But living in New York City at 18 years old, and then now living in Los Angeles, I've always tended to live in liberal meccas. And so I haven't experienced the lack of diversity of thought on the college campuses like so many conservatives are facing today. But I did experience that definitely in churches. Definitely at cocktail parties, definitely even in offices, even in places in talk radio or at Fox News where you assume that everyone thinks like you do. That isn't always the case. And I think it's a beautiful part of our political process of being able to meet other people and have discussions and debates. But, I get how, especially in that 18 to 22 range, it can be very challenging. And I do not envy students on college campuses today. I mean, Young America's Foundation and other organizations are doing incredible work for conservatism and liberty and freedom on campuses across the country. And I just hear these stories, even from, conservative Christian universities that want to shut out free thinkers and elements of free speech, GCU anyone. and it is incredibly disturbing to me how we are supposed to be the people that are for the underdog, I thought, and tend to be the ones that are trying to shut that speech up.
Nope, you're exactly right. And actually, I love that you brought up homeschooling, because I wanted to ask you briefly, what was your homeschooling experience like? And do you plan, I know you have 3 daughters and 1 on the way. Congratulations, by the way. Do you homeschool your own girls, or if not, is that something you'd recommend? I'm kind of curious as to that, and also your perspective on school choice.
I'm a huge proponent of school choice. It's one of my combative remarks when people talk about how they're pro-choice when it comes to abortion. I say, I'm pro the child being able to make that choice and not being murdered by the mother or doctor in the room. And I'm also pro that same mother and child being able to make a choice later in life that would help them be educated to the absolutely best possible scenario, not something that is determined or dictated by where they were born. which seems inherently anti-poor. It seems inherently anti-minority. It seems inherently rural people in situations like, of course, J.D. Vance talked about in Hillbilly Elegy, where people are stuck in this routine and really have no way to get out. And our government is forcing them to get a crappy education simply because of their zip code. That seems like such an awful principle to me that has nothing to do with our American values or the ability to grow and succeed and live the American dream. So I'm definitely
zip code.
Yeah, and that I don't understand how that's fair for people that say that they want to be fair. But so I'm a huge proponent of school choice. I do think that every child, every family has to determine what is best for them and their children. I would be open to homeschooling. I don't think I could be as graceful or good at it as my mother was all those years ago. So our girls are in a private Christian school, but I wish that other option. And I wish that other people had that option. And we really do take it on a case-by-case basis because each of our children is so unique and so different. And I think that parents all over the country, whether they're in, South Compton or Upper East Side of Manhattan or the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, where I'm from, should be able to have the same freedoms and the same choices.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Now, I'm curious. I don't want to get too personal here, but you're a wonderful example of a working mom, but you're also in the conservative world. And conservatives, we're sometimes, not so much anymore, but we're sometimes still slandered with, oh, well, you want women to be barefoot in the kitchen with a baby on the hip. And the leftists, you shouldn't be with your child at all. Of course, that's the stereotype they get. And I don't believe that either side is obviously correct, but I want to know, what is your take on traditional gender roles and how that plays in with your life, if you don't mind sharing that?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an element of my faith that plays more into the roles that my husband and I play in our home than politics ever has. And I think that, of course, many people maybe on the left don't understand that because they maybe have never picked up a Bible and read it and seen what it says about the importance of a husband and wife and a father and a mother. So when it comes to the gender roles of us as a married couple and as parents and how we parent our children, I guess, yeah, we are traditional in the sense that my husband is the head of the house. He is fiscally and physically responsible for the protection and provision of our family. What part of why I work isn't just for the paycheck. Part of why I work is because I hope and believe that it's an element of my purpose and my passion, and I want to be a positive influence on my daughters and have them see that they too can do that one day, and then hopefully influence other people as well. But I think that really, it's funny because Ben and I have had this conversation as friends off the air numerous times before, that if you look at both of us, of course, he's married to a very successful doctor. I don't know if you knew that or not. And then I've always been in the working world, even as a mom. There's sacrifices that you make as a working mom. There's both professionally and personally, but that doesn't mean that the roles of who's who in the household or who does what in a home has to change. I often say, I could not and would not be in the same position professionally if it weren't for the support and the amazing grilling and cleaning and laundry skills of my husband.
Absolutely. It's commonly thrown out there, behind every successful man there's a successful woman or a supportive woman. I think it's the other way around as well. It's a beautiful harmony. I feel like as a religious person, God created it for a special harmony that we have, and I love it. So I am curious on the topic of more of kind of feminine issues. How do you feel about the Me Too movement? And do you feel like that has actually done a lot of good for women and shedding light on that? Or do you feel like it's more hurt them in that sexual assault area?
I think I have mixed feelings on it. I think it is good. I love transparency. I love clarity, and I love justice being served. I think, unfortunately, though, there were and are continuing to be circumstances where, you have an Aziz Ansari situation, which isn't anything that I would have done with a young man in my single days, but it happened and it was consensual. But then this woman is pissed about it and decides to try to ruin his career. And that was lumped in with Me Too in the same way that all of the awful things that Harvey Weinstein did. And I think that we need to take things on a case-by-case basis, and absolutely would love and would prefer for justice to be served. But then I also see the broader fear, I think specifically that moms of sons have of, fraternity brothers that aren't assholes. Sorry, have.
No.
There's groups of people that you can't. Wrong. dates going wrong, a woman not even wanting the door held open for her. And I know that some people think that this is extreme, but these are all thought pieces that you can read on Huffington Post or Slate, people, let alone leftist Twitter or hashtag Me Too Twitter. I think the perfect example of, I think, the downfall of the Me Too movement, if you want to call it that, because once again, I do take things on a case-by-case basis, were, Alyssa Milano going up and sitting behind Brett Kavanaugh on Capitol Hill when there was no evidence to show that he was who Christine Blasey Ford and other leftists were saying he was. But yet, where were those same people when it came to Harvey Weinstein, massive liberal fundraiser, when it came to Bill Clinton? I'm sorry, even at points where it's come to Joe Biden, good old Uncle Joe Biden, and many others on their side of the aisle. So I think that as a whole, the Me Too movement definitely will go down in history, not just in pop culture and political culture, but I think that it could be something that is studied going forward of the pros and the cons and how everyone addressed it as a whole. And I hope in some way, I'm still optimistic that maybe it gave women the strength and the opportunity to come forward and share their stories and receive some level of justice and healing.
And hopefully even just opening the conversation, right, and bringing it into the mainstream, because up until then, we didn't talk about that a whole lot. And we have, I feel like since then, there's actually been an uprising of people even talking about sex trafficking and Operation Underground Railroad and all the coverage that a lot of these large organizations are now getting. And I feel like that didn't necessarily start with Me Too, but Me Too may have opened that door a little bit more.
So. Absolutely, and it is something, you bring that up. I mean, child sex trafficking is a huge issue. I think that most Americans assume are things that happen in third world countries and, parts of Central America or Thailand. But it is something that happens here, and it is something that ties into when it comes to border security and immigration. The majority of the people that I know that care about border security and immigration are people that care about the coyotes that are raping women and children and bringing them over the border. And the same people that traffic in human beings are the same people that traffic in illegal weapons and illegal drugs. And it's a cyclical pattern. And those are the type of people that we don't want able to abuse those young women and girls and be smuggling them into the country for hideous deeds.
Nope. I know firsthand to some extent what that's like. I'm actually, I talk about this occasionally, but I am a citizen of Mexico. I have dual citizenship now, but it's been to the point where I have had cousins killed by the mafia. I have had my mother held at gunpoint by the cartels, and it is a huge problem and one that we need to protect ourselves from with a wall. That is the first step. So now I am kind of curious. I'm going to switch tracks just a little bit here.
Okay.
We've had in our crazy world a new word come out called birth strikers, and it's women in Britain coming out saying they're not going to have children because our world is too scary. Global warming is killing our planet. There's no longer going to be nature. They might as well just not have any kids. I want to know what's your take on that, because first of all, they feel it as like the end of our world, the biggest issue facing our world. So your take on that, plus what do you think is a real big challenge facing American families and worldwide even? What do you feel like would be a bigger issue than global warming?
I am fine if crazy leftists do not have children, because all of us Christian conservatives can be fruitful and multiply, and then one day our children will take over the world. I often say that that's maybe my plan for taking over California and getting it back. I don't know. We'll see. See if it works or not. I only got a few more child rearing days in my future, years that I can carry. But I think that actually it is quite disturbing that, one, there is no scientific basis for their decision, thinking that having not having these children will allow them to save the planet, and not having these children because the world is going to end in 12 years or whatever AOC and some other environmental leftists are saying that it will. There's zero scientific evidence to show that. And then additionally, I think it just further proves that leftists truly want to rob women of the greatest superpower that I believe God ever gave us, and that is being a part of co-creating, growing, and sustaining human life. I literally felt like Gal Gadot after I had my first kid. I'm a hippie and I have home water births, but the rush of adrenaline and emotion and love and strength and power that you feel in that moment is something that is incomparable to anything that you will ever experience the rest of your life. And then the gift that you have and the challenge that you have of then raising that child. I think it's really a shame that some women seem to be so short-sighted that they see that as a problem instead of as a strength. And I think that as a whole, for maybe families internationally and here in the United States, is an issue. And then I think as another issue too, really does boil down to the education issue. And this is something that I wish that people on the right side of the aisle and Republicans specifically would take. I mean, even in liberal states like California, you have school choice issues and the ability of single moms or, minority families wanting and needing those vouchers to send their kids to a charter school or send their kids to a religious school really polls well, even in middle and left of center states. So I think that it's an issue where Republicans can take it and run with it and just start to influence people in a positive way and help children in the process, help families in the process, help women in the process by bettering people's education, which in turn is going to do huge benefits to the American family and the American economy.
No, I absolutely agree. And on top of that too, I even just think we have issues with our school choice in the part that there are a lot of families who struggle with, they want to do, their public school, but then they also want to take trips to do educational trips. They're going to get truancy letters and inevitably end up in jail in some states. And so it feels like on every end, they're handcuffing people to inopportune and the least best for their child and for their family.
Yeah, and it doesn't work. I mean, I'm sorry, but somebody that works for the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. and has never been to Tallahassee, Florida, or, Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Riverside, California, how are they supposed to know the best thing that is going to work for that child? I mean, there needs to be a level of localization and individualism that's going to work better than what has currently been done for the last 50 years in our American education system.
Yes. All right. So last question I want to ask you is,
okay.
First off, what are you reading right now? And then second to that is, what do you feel like would be your number one read or first few reads for conservatives, specifically young conservative? A lot of our tribe is very young.
Okay, so I'm reading. Does Dr. Seuss count?
Oh, totally. Stories? Are you kidding me? Dr. Seuss all the way. We just had Dr. Seuss week. That was a big deal. The schools had it all decked out for a week.
Oh, I know. My 5-year-old got green eggs and ham at TK. She was very excited about it. I think, oh gosh, I really don't have time to sit down and read books anymore. I am slowly working my way through, Ben Shapiro's new book, Right Side of History. I'm a fan of that. I think that that's definitely something that everyone should pick up. I think it does a great job of kind of breaking down the philosophy of Western civilization, and it's a good primer of sorts for that kind of theology and of those philosophical thinkers that he talks about. They're not technically a book, but they've been made into a book now. I would highly recommend the Federalist Papers. I think the first time I read them, I was 16 years old, reread them at 18, and then I try to read them again every 5 years or so. I would recommend that. There's an incredible book that I read when I was a Lincoln Fellow at the Claremont Institute, and I can't remember it for the life of me, but if everybody reached out to the Claremont Institute, I'm sure they would know that what I'm talking about. And it's a history of progressivism that really breaks down how awful and racist and disgusting Woodrow Wilson was and the influence in his writings that he had on leftists and liberals in the Democratic Party, the modern Democratic Party. And I think that it's important to read that so you understand the origins of where that came from and where those principles and if you could even call them that, and their mind processing comes from. And then I would say Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. I would start with those three, if that's. I think that's enough. Yeah.
And then throw on Ben's book.
Don't be afraid to have dictionary.com and the encyclopedia open, while you go through them. I think that unfortunately those specifically the Federalist Papers. Heck, I know kids that went through public school that now work in politics that said that they never remember reading the Constitution. So maybe just start there.
Well, when I was a homeschooler way back when, I remember going to a George Washington's birthday celebration, and they literally asked the audience, it was a large audience of maybe 400, if that's large, an audience of about probably 400 people, and they asked him, everyone raise your hand who's even read the Constitution, and he was like, maybe a third. So, and a lot of those people were government officials, which is sad. They should have raised their hand just for the shame. But no, I love those book recommendations. Those are phenomenal. Alicia, lastly, where can people find you on social media? If they want to have you come speak, where can they contact you?
Yeah, so we have actually a Daily Wire speakers page where you can request Ben and Michael if, you really wanted him, I don't know, our very own Cassie Dillon, myself, all of our crew over here. There's a Daily Wire speaker page that everybody can go check out. Or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm on all the things except Snapchat. I've never really been a Snapchat fan. I'm a grandma millennial and I've just never really been into it, but I do appreciate the Insta filters.
I tried Snapchat for a while, and it was too much for me. Too much.
Okay, good. That makes me feel a little less old. Okay, good.
Your Insta stories are gold, and especially your outfit. Oh my goodness! Every time I'm just like, Elisha, come on. You're putting yourself in the game. They're amazing. So thank you again so much for joining me today, and hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.